Hello and welcome to another edition of the C Squared Podcast. Your host Curtis, my co-host Kevin and Holly, and today we are here for a roundtable discussion on a topic that is very near and dear to Holly's heart today. She begged to talk about this topic because it is so near and dear to her heart, and what it is it's about discrimination in music, metal in general. And Holly, for those of you guys who do not know, is a student who studies these types of things, and she's actually getting a PhD in gender studies, I think is what it was. Good. And so she's going to lead the chat, and she is going to walk us through the problems and non-problems that she sees in the scene. So over to you, Holly.
Great, yes. So I thought it would be quite interesting to sort of talk about discrimination in the sort of the broader sense, so incorporating, gender, race, disability, everything. Just because journalism and, metal media outlets play a huge role in terms of controlling the narrative around these things. So I thought it might be quite interesting just to have a chat about it, anything that anyone's seen or experienced, etc. Because I think it is sort of worth acknowledging that sometimes the media is, just trying to get clicks, and sometimes it is actually trying to push for equality, and it's kind of figuring out what's going on and when. So this is quite an open discussion, and I've not really scripted anything, but I'd be interested to hear any of your guys' thoughts on this if you would like to start off.
I'll start off. So just for anybody who's listening here, so to clarify, I am the only person that is not part of a minority group in this chat, so my opinion is probably the least out of anyone. But my first question is, what have you two guys experienced, if anything? Like Kevin, I guess we'll start with you. In terms of discrimination, obviously.
So before I get to that, I just kind of want to say one thing. When you were saying that, as a white male or whatever, that your opinion is somewhat lesser. What automatically kind of hit me was that, well, I guess that's sort of like the sort of hip thing to say now, is that, white people in general or whatever are, take a step back because of what. But at the same time, it's like, when it boils down to it, none of us are going anywhere. And these problems, or whatever you want to call them, need to be solved in the way that we can all, and this is going to sound so ridiculously hippie-ish, but in a way that when it gets down to it, wherever the end of this is, and we're probably never going to see it in our lifetimes, but we all kind of have to live together. So I don't know if this to say that somebody's opinion is lesser or less value because of who their parents are, and how they happen to come out of the womb and whatever. Anyway, Holly's disappeared.
Sorry, someone really tried to phone me. My phone is, I know it's fine.
Now, I don't know if what I just said is going to be, everything, it could be construed as somewhat offensive, like, how dare you give a white man a voice. But what I'm trying to say is that when it all boils down to it, everyone's got some kind of learning curve or some learning to do, and there's a learning curve, and it's going to be a different curve for every sort of segment of society, group of people. So, yeah, I don't know. Does that make sense? Is that like, did I just say something totally stupid? Because that just came out of off the top of my head.
But to clarify, Kevin, I didn't mean my opinion wasn't valid, even though I said that. What I meant is I do not have the same experience level as
Absolutely.
you guys. My opinion, I do think my opinion is valid. I will toot my own horn for a second. I do think it's valid, but at the same time, I have not experienced it as you guys may have. So I do not have the same life experiences as you do. I should probably.
Okay, so actually, since Holly is going to be supposed to be leading this, or is leading this, or whatever, I don't know who's leading what anymore. What you tell us, based on your experiences. Okay, and another thing I'm interested in is that I'm assuming you're like, if I remember correctly, you're like half our age.
I'm 25, so
yeah, like exactly half my age.
Oh, right. Okay.
So like what your experience has been like as a younger, newer metal fan, especially with, with the internet, growing up in a digital age, also experiencing what you've experienced pre-pandemic versus what's been going on online during the pandemic, where people are sort of like, hiding behind their computers and avatars and handles a bit more because there's just no shows and no scene to like actually physically participate in. So anyway, what do you got for me?
I mean, it's one of those things. I phrased this in the past that I've been quite lucky that I've not really had many bad experiences. And I kind of think actually that's a really weird way of saying it, because it shouldn't be a lucky thing. It should just be how it is. I haven't ever really had any, major sexist like behavior towards me. I get comments on our band's Instagram every now and again with just, stupid misogynistic shit, but it's not all of the time. It is just the odd comment every once in a while. When I was back in high school, I used to go to this like band thing after school. And I was the only female guitarist there. And so I used to get like the lads were just being a bit like, oh, okay, at first, but then they were fine afterwards. So it was never really a major thing. It was just kind of people seemed to be surprised for some reason. I was interested in being a guitarist and being in metal, but it was never really a problem. I've never had any bad experiences at gigs, whether performing or just being there as a music fan. And so I feel kind of like, well, actually, there must be significant change, because I've not had any major problems, and I know other people who haven't had major problems either. But then I do see people who have been, they've been attacked at gigs, or they've been badly treated, or they've had industry people sort of behaving inappropriately towards them for whatever reason, whether it's race, gender, whatever. So that it's one of those things of, yes, I'm not experiencing a huge amount of it personally, but I know it exists because I see it happening to other people. And that's kind of why I'm still sort of fighting for it, if that makes sense. Like, I feel as though some people maybe think, oh, we've reached equality, or we're closer to it than actually maybe people realize. And this is why I'm still quite passionate about it, because I see it with other people. Right. So this is kind of why I think it's important to share experiences, because yes, someone might have really good experiences and some have really bad experiences.
Right. And it's, it's difficult for me to say what someone else's experience is like, but seeing something is like, okay, so here's an example, I guess. This one just came to mind too. So I was at a show in Montreal early 2020. And it was at a venue that normally doesn't host metal shows or this type of music shows. And man, the people who worked at this place were like fucking shitheads. And the way specifically they were treating a lot of the women there was just kind of like, what? How the fuck did people get away with this stuff? The stuff that they were saying, because I was in Montreal, like I said, so I was with a friend of mine who speaks French. I don't speak French. And she was kind of translating some of the stuff she was overhearing. And I was just like, whoa, what the like some of the shit these people were saying about just innocent people standing in line to buy merch or standing at a bar or whatever was kind of gross. And yeah, I mean, it's like there was like this subtle undercurrent of just shittiness at this show based on the staff at this particular venue. So there you go. And then in another sort of more innocent sort of thing, I guess you'd say, was so I was at a immolation show in New York City, and I was wearing, I don't know if you know the band from Sweden, Ice Age, from like the 80s, late 80s. Not the shitty fucking post-hardcore band from Copenhagen that exists today that just put out some, not that shitty band. They're terrible. Jesus Christ, they're awful. But no, Ice Age, the Splash band from Sweden. Anyway, So I'm wearing this shirt, and Ice Age haven't put anything out in however long. I mean, they just sort of like did a whatever a few years ago where they kind of re-recorded some old songs and whatever with a new lineup, but pretty obscure stuff. So I'm wearing this shirt, and some guy from across the room, and you can always see it. He's like, you can see him just pointing out to his buddy about, like, obviously he knows who Ice Age is. So I can hear him going on about Ice Age. So his friend comes over and goes, "Hey, my friend asked me to ask you where you got that shirt." And I go, "Oh, I just, I've always been a big fan. I kind of just wrote them one day and got it through the mail or whatever. They sent me one." And he's like, "Well, tell me about this band," because he's going off about how they're fucking awesome, this and that. And I'm like, "Well, I said something like describing them, and I said, like, their 4-song demo is, still one of my favorite recordings of all time, blah, 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 blah." And by this time, his friend had come over, and I'm trying to remember how this story went, but the guy basically who came over continued to bring up the fact that I wasn't bringing up the fact that Ice Age were an all-female band. I would say Ice Age they're a thrash band from Sweden, 1980, blah, 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 1988, 1989. He's like, he would stop me and go, no, all girl thrash band, man. And I'm like, well, yeah, but they're just a good band, dude. Like, what's the big deal? He's like, and he would continually stop me like that to make sure he was pointing out to his friend that Ice Age was 4 women as opposed to 4 dudes. So, like, again, there's like this little subtle thing in there, which, he was obviously a fan of the band, but felt the need to, for whatever reason, point out that was the difference, as if it made a difference.
Yeah. I find this odd because I can't always tell if people are doing it because they want to be like, oh, look, women are doing this thing, proof that it's not, it's not all men, or if they're doing it because, oh, look, this is really weird, women are doing something that they shouldn't be doing, quotes, so I can't always
shouldn't
tell.
be doing.
Yeah, you know what I mean. It's what people do.
Right.
But yeah, it's kind of are people doing it with good intentions, or are people doing it because they're being sexist? And I can't always tell, which I think is part of the problem, that you sort of get this othering going on, and it's kind of well, if we just stop pointing out gender altogether, then that kind of solves one problem.
Well,
but then
yeah, but
gender becomes invisible, and naturally then you're not necessarily pointing out representation where it's needed.
Right. And at the same time, no matter how hard you try, and no matter how hard anyone wants to ignore the fact, there are differences between people on all levels. I think the difference is if you're pointing it out nefariously versus if you're just pointing it out because it exists. Now, I admittedly have written and said a lot of dumb shit over the years. Like I have, but none of it has been because, like, like I said, none of it's been nefarious.
Yeah,
that's not been my intent. I don't know. Some people, it might come across that way, like especially something that's written for people, like how you comprehend someone else's writing is obviously going to be different, like what you take from something.
Yeah.
So whatever, but I can say for myself that even when I'm saying the dumbest fucking shit or whatever, I'm not trying to be racist, sexist, mean, ageist, ableist, whatever. I'm just pointing shit out because I think it's funny or whatever, because it's there.
I think part of the issue though too is I think like around our ages, there was a lot of comedy and stuff where it was a little bit more risque than it is nowadays, and we can tell the difference. That, like Eddie Murphy, for example, probably prime example. We all thought he was hilarious back in the day. At least I did. I'm sure you did too. And I don't think he meant anything nefarious about half the shit he said. It was just he was cracking jokes. You know what I mean?
Right. And if you watch, and it's a societal shift too, because if you watch Eddie Murphy's Delirious now, which my wife and I will still watch it like once a year or something like that. We'll throw it on just because. Like there are sections of that, and it's still like, one of my favorite stand-up routines of all time, but there are sections of it where it's just like, especially the part where he's making fun of AIDS, where it's just like, whoa, dude, like that doesn't fly anymore. I mean, at the time, Especially, I mean, when that came out, I was like, what, 11 or 12 years old. So I probably thought it was hilarious. But at the time, you know, that was looked at a lot differently. When you look at it now, it's like, yeah, that's not nearly as cool as the routine about his aunt falling down the stairs, which is still awesome. Anyway.
So what I was going to say about it was there's that part right there, but at the same time, I think now this is directed probably mainly at Holly. I think part of the thing, this is again, I realize we're like, you're half our age, so this might come off as being stupid sounding or whatever. At the same time, I think a lot of time your generation takes things a little bit too seriously, where we take it not as seriously, you know what I mean, while still not having the malicious intent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's interesting. I find this hard to tell because there are certainly some people I agree, of my age who I think don't always, I don't know, I think they sometimes just take things out of context is probably the main issue.
Yeah.
But then I'll be honest, I know more than enough people who are older who do that as well. So I'm
Fair.
not entirely convinced it's an age thing, but I certainly agree that people, yeah, there are times where I think people get concerned about the wrong things. Like, you know, like, I don't, do you get much, I don't know, people going around and calling out snowflakes in Canada?
Yeah.
Yeah, you do get that as well. Yeah, so it's like,
Damn, I was calling out snowflakes yesterday when my car was covered in snow and I came out in the morning. God damn it. It's almost May. Why is it still snowing? Anyway, oh, sorry, wrong snowflake.
No,
I don't know. I think that in some instances, though, I think that it does need to be called out in whatever way, like whether very overtly or whether it's just like, okay, I don't want anything to do with this person anymore.
Yeah.
But what I find more troubling, I guess maybe you'd say, is the people who will say and do very overtly whatever, sexist, racist, whatever stuff.
Yep.
And then and say, oh no, I was just kidding, or I'm just, it's just a joke. Why can't you take a joke? Or it's just this.
Yeah.
Because it's very obvious when things are jokes or when things aren't. And when people fall back on, you can't take a joke. Well, yeah, that's I think that's a weak defense.
It's a matter of intent completely. Like, I mean, Holly knows I say dumb shit all the time. I mean, she's still with me after what, a year or whatever now. And she knows I'm not being malicious if I say something stupid. It's me either joking or I legitimately mean like, be offensive or whatever. But yeah, I think you're right, Kevin. It's like more of a matter of intent, and you can kind of tell. Like, if you say,
and I will tell you a story. I tell this story a lot, so I don't know if I've told you guys before, but I think this maybe not perfectly encapsulates, but encapsulates what you're trying to say. So I was at a show in somewhere in Kentucky, and it wasn't like a big city in Kentucky. It was like a B market, C market place. And we went and saw Hate Eternal. So, Hate Eternal, Eric Rutan used to be a Morbid Angel, blah, blah, blah. He's got like his fan base of death metal fans and guitar freaks and all this kind of stuff. So there were these two dudes who came down to the show early because they wanted to meet and hang out and whatever with Eric. And like I said, this was small town Kentucky, and they had like really thick accents and whatever, man. I just because of it, I found it really difficult to understand what the hell they were saying a lot of the time. But they were cool, dude. They're nice. They hung out. They actually helped Hate Eternal like move their gear, which is like, all right, cool. I'm sure they appreciated that. But anyway, so these guys are talking and we're just hanging out and blah, 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 blah. And they started talking to each other about something. And in the process, they started using the phrase colored to describe a black guy they were talking about. Now, the word that terminology went out like what, in the 60s or whatever, and it's considered offensive to a lot of people. But these guys, I mean, I could tell because these guys weren't being like, it wasn't like they were being racist. They were just using outmoded phraseology, but they weren't being devilish or nefarious or whatever about it. And I think that when you're talking about intent, that's kind of what matters. Like, yeah, these guys live in the sticks somewhere, probably, you know, don't have a lot of access to whatever's going on in big cities and how quickly things change socially in other parts of the world and stuff. And, you know, I don't know what, you know, it was the first time I ever met or seen these guys, and I've never met or seen them since. So I have no idea what they're really like. But in that case, it's like, okay, yeah, they're using these whatever terms, but they're just being themselves about it and not being, you know, they're not outright saying the N-word as a, you know, a cutting barb or whatever you want to say, or being malicious about it. So there you go. That's like,
Yeah.
and I'm sure that's something that, you know, as the societies sort of move forward and shift and stuff like that, that younger people are going to see, probably going to have to like learn to deal with a bit more. Like my son, who is 19, like, you know, they talk in a way, or, you know, use whatever terms and stuff like that, which, you know, that's cool, that's their generation, but I guess sometimes find some of the stuff I say offensive or outmoded because it's not, you know, it's not what they have learned, or it's not like what their social set has sort of adopted. So, but he does, you know, he needs to understand, you know, he understands that I'm not, you know, I mean, I may be misanthropic, but I'm not racist. I may be, you know, all this stuff, but I'm not like malicious about it. So, yeah, I mean, it's, I guess, in one sense, it's also going to have to be the generations listening to and understanding each other, and also weighing in the matter of intent and whatever. I mean, there's a, speaking of comedians, there's an awesome, you know, I think it's like Jim Jeffries' last special he did for Netflix, the one intolerable or intolerant or something like that, where he talks about how his dad has come around, who grew up in, like, you know, rural backwater Australia. His dad, who's like, you know, in his 80s, I guess, or 70s, something like that, who has come around from growing up in real macho, whatever, outback upbringing, to voting positively for, you know, the whatever referendum they had in Australia on gay marriage a few years ago and stuff like that. And how his friends will, his dad's friends, I mean, will, like, you know, poke fun at him and stuff like that. But it's still like, you know, just do your thing, let people live their lives. And, you know, whatever, if I'm using outmoded terms, that's cool, but I'm not chasing you down the street with a knife. There's a difference.
Yeah, no, it is. It's very much I think treating each thing in context, and yeah, actually talking to people and understanding where they're coming from, because you know, a lot of people are very quick to, it's like cancel culture, which I have a huge problem with, because just canceling people for saying the wrong thing when the likelihood is they didn't mean it is not going to solve anything. It's actually having a conversation with people and understanding where they're coming from, and educating people if they just genuinely don't understand what's going on. I mean, I have this with a few older relatives, and like some of my friends are trans and some of them are non-binary and identify like that. And some of my older family members just don't quite get it, because it's new language for them and it's a new way of thinking, but it's kind of, they are mostly open, you know, they're sort of open to learning about it, and that's kind of the most important thing. I think it's when people sort of close off and do the thing of, oh, I don't want to be educated, or I don't want to attempt to help improve other people's lives by not discriminating against them. That's where I have a huge problem, really.
That's also a generational thing too that takes time, though.
Well, this is the thing, it takes time. And yeah, because stuff just wasn't spoken about, and so of course they weren't going to know about it. Whereas, you know, we have the internet at our fingertips, and I think people sometimes forget how much of like how much that helps. Like the fact that we can just find out anything and educate on anything so quickly nowadays. So
I agree.
Yeah.
I want to change the topic just slightly to one
Yeah.
thing, which we probably will probably have some words on. So here's the thing I hate. I don't like it when people put women or races or sexuality as being the thing, as like a token thing. I hate that. Like that bugs me. I've had people do that with me with C Squared. They're like, okay, you only hired a bunch of women just because that way you got women. And it's like, I hate that. And it's like, I didn't even fucking occur to me that all you guys were fucking women until it was pointed out to me that I'm only working with women. And it literally did not even come into my even thought process at all when doing it. But
didn't Keith used to work for you?
He did, but he doesn't anymore.
I'm pretty sure Keith's not a woman.
No, he's not. But now, but now, I mean, Keith is here, so I mean, it's like all women.
He's not? Okay.
Yeah, he hasn't been with us for about 8 months or something like that. So so I've had people do that to me, or they go like, oh, something like that. So Holly's opinion first, and then I want to get Kevin's. I know Kevin's probably got on it.
Yeah,
why would you say that?
Yeah, I have a huge problem with tokenism. I'm trying to think. I think I have sort of experienced it a little bit, I guess. But it's no, it's not helping anyone. It's not helping us gain equality, and it's not helping educate other people. It's just making the whole situation worse, because then it puts minority groups and other people in a position of, oh, they've only gotten somewhere because they're minorities or whatever, which is not the case at all. And I don't know, I see Facebook comments and things like that where festivals announce a lineup and people, you get all the gatekeepers in the comments being like, oh, they're only there because, she's a woman or whatever. And it's like, have you considered the fact that they're actually a good band and that's why they're there? I mean, there is a bit of an issue, I guess, around the whole whether quotas and things like that are needed just for the sake of getting representation out there. And then once it's there, you can get rid of the quotas because people know that these bands are around and they're going to choose them if they genuinely like them. But I mean, that's kind of a bit of another kettle of fish.
But Kevin, what are your thoughts on this? Like, obviously, I guess from a racial standpoint, I guess is what it would be. Or you can talk about both.
Dude, I could probably talk about this shit all day.
well, we got about 15 minutes left, so
well, it might not be what you want to hear, though.
I'm down for anything.
No, I'm with Holly on the whole thing about it not helping anybody because you don't know. Okay, you can look at it in a lot of different fields, and I mean, I think like the main, I guess the biggest one or most widely known or whatever one would be like the entire affirmative action movement.
Yeah. Which,
whatever, but that it's a bit more of a touchy thing because it's based on race. If you look at, okay, I don't know if the UK has this. Maybe it does, and maybe not anymore. But in Canada, we had the CanCon thing, where on the radio or in whatever media, was it 35% of
it's
whatever?
A lot number, but it's something stupid. It is
35% has to be whatever you hear on the radio has to be considered Canadian content.
Yeah,
and there's always been an issue about whether or not what constitutes Canadian content. I know they've kind of jerked the rules around based on it's like, oh, it can be an American artist or a whatever artist, but as long as it's produced by a Canadian or recorded in a Canadian studio, it's considered Canadian. It's really dicey as to what they consider. But anyway, over the years, and especially I guess back in the day before things got really digital, it did help a lot of bands that are good, and admittedly I still listen to this day, get somewhere that I possibly maybe never would have heard of if I lived, or if those rules didn't exist, or I lived in a different country. Like, I mean, I like a lot of bad Canadian rock, from the 80s and 70s, right? But
Yeah.
would I have ever heard that shit if there wasn't that, and I'm going to use a really bad word here, ghettoizing rule saying 35% of this stuff that we're hearing on the radio, and when the radio was a lot, more of an arbiter of taste or whatever.
Yeah.
That helped. There's no doubt it helped. There's no doubt in my mind that like the shit like Steelheart, Trooper, Harlequin, like all those bands from the 70s and 80s, like Chilliwack, none of that shit probably would have been heard anywhere if it wasn't for the Canadian content rules, which I'm thankful for because I love that stuff. But when it comes to more touchy subjects, I guess, I don't know, man, you're dancing on a landmine, because it's like, are you, for example, for a job posting, are you getting the best candidate or are you getting the token candidate? Are you getting, are you streamlining? Again, I'm going to say, are you ghettoizing a festival by saying it's the, whether it's the, what's that one where it's like women only bands or female?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
one.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's two of them. There's one in Canada. There's one actually in BC, I think.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
I think so. And then there's one in Italy or Germany, I think. I don't know, whatever, somewhere in Europe.
Yeah.
Anyway, but at the same time, is something like Prague Power, that festival, are you shutting out so-and-so bands, or is like this festival only catering to like Keep It True?
Yeah.
Like, is that festival catering? Is that in the same league? Probably not, but it kind of reeks of it a little bit,
I guess. Yeah.
I forget what my point was.
Ghettoizing your head, Kevin.
Right. So, I mean, in some cases, I guess it's weird because I appreciate the fact I appreciate it working in some instances, and in other instances, I'm just like, fuck that. I don't like it. I'm all against it. I mean, and I notice it a lot, being half black and half white my entire life. Like, of course, I've noticed, and it's funny because I was talking about this with somebody the other day, and what someone asked, it was like some kind of like sociology thing that they're working on or whatever, and they asked, when did you realize that you weren't white or you were racially different or whatever? And I'm just like, until people started pointing it out to me when I was a kid, I don't know, it was just me. Until I started watching The Jeffersons, I didn't know it was a big deal to have a one black parent and one white parent. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, the one thing that I've noticed a lot on TV and movies, especially more so TV commercials than anything, is just how there's just so much interracial couplings especially in TV commercial ads. If you watch, and again, I don't know what it's like in the UK, but if you watch like, an ad for Pampers or an ad for, whatever beer company or an ad for whatever shoe company or whatever, 9 times out of 10 these days, it's going to be like an interracial couple featured. And that's cool. But sometimes it just seems like people are reaching to be woke or whatever, or reaching to be accepted, or reaching not to offend, or reaching to whatever. And it's like, all right, are you like, what's the intent here? We get back to intent. What's the intent here? Is this like an actual evening of the playing field, or are you just trying to score brownie points because of you don't want to offend anybody? Yeah. Or what is it? I have no idea. I mean, I know from working in film and TV for a few years that, and I had this described to me on my very first day working on set, is probably they explained it to me as this is probably one of the most racist, sexist businesses you'll ever walk into, but people just kind of put up with it. But at the same time, on the back end of it, I don't know, is that industry sort of like coming around? Because that's where I see a lot of representation. And I mean, maybe that's just my overactive imagination being suspicious about it, but and you know, and everybody's intent is pure and whatever, but it's just something I've noticed. And I know
Yeah.
we've gotten way off topic in terms of music and metal and stuff, but I'm just saying, like, I mean, it's part of media, it's part of the broader scope of society, so it's all in there. And like I was saying at the beginning, I mean, we all kind of have to live with each other, one big unhappy planet. So well, there you go.
Yeah, no, whilst you're slightly off the rails, I'll carry on with it because I was watching a video recently where someone was pointing out in advertising the way that things have like really feminist and empowering women and all of this stuff. And sort of pointing out the fact that, well, ultimately these adverts are trying to sell you stuff. And so it's kind of, well, it's yes, okay, it's good that they're, you know, not being discriminative, but ultimately they are trying to sell you things. And if they know that people are more likely to buy something if the company has like a front of being equal and promoting you know, equality and everything, then they're ultimately going to make more sales. And so it is kind of the taking everything with a pinch of salt, I think, and kind of discerning, is this just a marketing gimmick or is it a genuine value of the company?
Right. And I mean, at the very beginning of the pandemic, I remember, and for some reason, I was thinking about this the other day. There was this particular Burger King commercial that stuck out in my mind where they had some dude who was, you know, in his Burger King uniform or whatever, saying, we know you're probably not thinking about Burger King now, but we're thinking about you. We've instituted these new things like no touch delivery and no touch whatever at our drive-through windows, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, I mean, okay, on the surface, that seems pretty responsible. They're, you know, at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, no one really knew what like how deadly or whatever the disease and what its transmission was like and blah, 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 blah. But, you know, I mean, on the surface, like I said, that seems responsible, but they're still trying to sell you Whoppers.
Yeah.
One note too, that I don't know if you guys are going to agree with me on this or not. The thing I've always noticed is that anybody that is trying to overly sell themselves as being inclusive or non-racist or non-homophobic always end up being the worst offenders against it later. Like the dudes that always end up being like the male feminist total thing or the non-racist, you always find out later it's like you don't want anything to do with them. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but that always seems to be the case to me 90% of the time.
Yeah, it's always the people that are like, I'm not racist, but, and it's like the but. Okay.
Yeah. Or like I'm totally inclusive of women and that's all they talk about for like 2 weeks. Then you find out later.
Well, going back to comedians, there was oh man, I wish I could remember who it was. I can remember the bit, but it might have been Greg Giraldo or Patton Oswalt. But it's like basically, you know, they're saying kind of the same thing where it's like, you know, when someone says, "Oh, I'm not going to say, you know, to not be racist," or I'm not going to say that, you know, I'm not to say I'm being racist, or I'm not going to try to be racist. You know, they're going to say the most racist shit right after they say that. It's almost like it's like a qualifier. And like I was saying before, like the kind of people who would sort of say whatever, but it's just a joke. So don't take, you know, don't jump down my throat. I'm just joking, even though, you know, in whatever way they're not.
You can always spot the intent.
And that's, and I think that's, you know, that's a good theme when we've come around to it. We keep coming back to it. It is intent. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I guess, yeah. Sorry. Go on. I'll hand it off to someone else.
Holly, so what do we want to cover still? We got about 5 minutes left. Is there anything else we want to cover on this subject?
I mean, I think we've covered quite a lot, really, because it's one of those things. We are not going to come to the one single golden shiny answer that fixes everything, because there isn't one. So it's kind of, I guess, the reason that I quite like having these discussions, it's because it's sort of just making sure that, you know, people acknowledge that there are problems and are, because I think that's the thing, sometimes if you forget the problems are there, then they really don't get fixed. So it is sometimes like important every now and again.
Question I have for you. Sorry, did I cut you off? Sorry. A question I have for you is like, if in your studying this, and I'm guessing there's some form of, like you get into whatever group discussions and debates, like what are the debates like when you have a classroom full of people who are studying this stuff? Like what are the sort of the hot topics, and what are, is it sort of like people all kind of like preaching to the choir, like all time talking about the same thing in different ways, like kind of like what we've been doing? or are there like full on like people like butting heads, like, you racist piece of shit motherfucker, no I'm not, blah, 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 you sex. Like, does that happen? Like what is it like, what's the classroom scene like these days, or Zoom scene, I guess it would be?
It's going to be more Zooms, because I spent most of the past year or so sat in my room reading books, and that's kind of it really. In my experience, it's I'd say everyone is pretty much on the same page, although that's usually because I'm having these conversations with other people who are also studying gender studies to some extent. I think it's quite interesting. In a couple of months, I should be doing a conference that's supposed to be interdisciplinary. So I'm interested to see if people from other, like from, I don't know, geography or whatever, how they react to it, because I think that's sometimes quite interesting. It's because it's very easy, I think, being in a bubble of gender studies students, we're kind of all on the same page, and we know sort of, we all have quite similar values and things that we're working towards. So it's more when we're talking to people who are sort of outside of this bubble that
Right,
maybe things will start to get heated. I don't know, we will see.
I'll tell you a funny story. So it's funny you mentioned the bubble, and people within that bubble sort of all whatever, and it's interesting to watch what happens when the bubble sort of gets popped, I guess, is to continue the analogy. But so years and years ago, when I was in university, I took a gender or women's studies course as an elective because I kind of had to, and it was cool, whatever. It was, good to learn stuff and whatever. But for the final essay, we had to, it was like something about analyzing media TV shows in some way. I can't remember, but I just remember writing an essay about the TV show Married with Children, and how it like subverts typical domestic roles and all this kind of shit, whatever. And I'm a halfway decent writer, and I remember I got an A+ on it, and fine, whatever, right? Cool. Send me on my way, class is over, whatever, on to the next. I found out after the fact that, and I mean, like I said, this was a women's studies course, gender studies course. So it was like literally like 25 women and me in a classroom. And I found out after the fact that a handful of other people in the class went to the professor and like basically freaked out that how could a man score the highest mark get the highest mark out of in the class. This is wrong. This is like literally just like, how could this happen? How could you do, how you're supposed to, you're supposed to be one of us, like literally pulling out all that kind of stuff because I wrote a decent paper.
I have a huge problem with stuff like this, because turning against each other is not going to solve anything. It doesn't help. Yeah, so, I don't understand that at all. Yeah.
To wrap this up, so Holly, let's final words from you, Professor Holly. Take us to the end of the podcast with some words of wisdom.
Well, yeah, because it's a topic I can't really conclude. It's not really going to be a very good conclusion. I think ultimately, I like having these discussions. I think they're useful. I think hopefully other people find them interesting to listen to, or either that, or we just put everyone off our podcasts. Either way. But this is it. This is the end of the podcast, isn't it? We're never going to do another one. We're ruined.
We've killed it. We buried it.
We'll do another one at some point, Holly. But yeah.
I think it would be interesting to have to do these things with more opposing views, maybe.
Sure.
I mean,
So
I don't know who would come on here.
I would-
come on anywhere going, yeah, I'm a full-on sexist, racist motherfucker. I want to talk about it and let you know about it. I don't know who's going to do that, but
I guess we'll figure that out. Anyways, I'm going to wrap up this podcast. Kevin for coming on. Holly, thank you for leading it. And with that, we are done.